The elites tell us history is written by kings, presidents, and prime ministers. But what if the real authors of history hid in the shadows? What if the most powerful figure in modern Europe wasn't a politician or a banker, but a woman whose name you've never heard? Maria Snoeys-Lagler. To most of the world, she doesn't exist. Search her name and you'll find little more than scattered obituaries and rumors. And yet, her influence stretched into the heart of Europe's elite. She stood behind the curtain at secret gatherings where policies were shaped, leaders were chosen, and economies were quietly adjusted. Maria was not a head of state. She held no elected office. And yet, she moved in circles where prime ministers waited for invitations. She attended meetings where journalists were locked out, but presidents were locked in. Her playground was the Bilderberg Group, one of the most secretive gatherings of political and financial elites in the modern world. A gathering dismissed as a conference, but whispered about as the steering committee for the West. And Maria? She wasn't just another face at the table. She was a hostess, a gatekeeper, and according to some, an architect of influence. While others posed for cameras, Maria stayed in the background, quietly deciding who got close to power and who was shut out. Think about this. If you've ever heard of the Bilderberg meetings, you've probably heard names like Henry Kissinger, David Rockefeller, or European royals. But Maria Snoeys-Lagler? She was never in the spotlight, yet somehow always in the room. That is not an accident, because true influence doesn't flaunt itself. It hides. Maria built relationships across governments, banks, and dynasties. She could connect a Belgian prime minister to a German industrialist, a British journalist to a Dutch royal, a Wall Street banker to a Vatican emissary. And always in settings where no transcripts were kept. Her official biography is sparse. Her unofficial reputation is extraordinary. Some insiders described her as the quiet queen of the network. She wasn't the wealthiest. She wasn't the loudest. She was the one trusted with secrets. Rumors claim she facilitated deals worth billions, that her discreet introductions altered the course of European integration, that she could make or break a career with a single recommendation or a single warning. And yet, try to find details about her, and you find shadows. Why? Because the power Maria held was the kind that depends on invisibility. Her strength was never in public speeches. It was in whispered conversations at dinner tables where the future of nations was being casually decided. Maria's ties reached into the highest levels of European aristocracy. She was seen alongside the House of Orange in the Netherlands. She had the ear of Belgian royalty, and through Bilderberg, she was connected to the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and powerful American interests. The narrative presented to the public was always the same. Nothing to see here, just another private gathering of business leaders. But if that were true, why was Maria's presence so carefully buried? When she died in 2002, the coverage was almost non-existent. A handful of obituaries noted her passing, but none dared to outline her influence. None dared to explain why someone with no official title was invited year after year to the most guarded meetings of the West. It was as if the world had agreed to forget her. And here lies the greatest clue. When power erases your name, it's often because you mattered too much. Maria Snoeys-Lagler may have been the woman who linked Europe's aristocrats with its industrialists, its politicians with its bankers, its journalists with its spymasters, a living junction point of influence. Her story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How many decisions about wars, economies, or elections were first whispered in her presence? How many policies were sealed with her nod of approval? And how many careers rose or fell because Maria quietly moved her hand behind the scenes? History is full of men who flaunted their power, but Maria represents a different archetype, the hidden hand, the silent broker, the one whose face never appeared on a coin but whose voice echoed through palaces. It's easy to dismiss her as an attendee of elite events, but those who study power know access is everything. And Maria had access not once, not twice, but for decades. If the Bilderberg Group is the secret parliament of the elite, then Maria was its custodian. Not the one delivering the speeches, but the one deciding who got through the door. What makes Maria's story even more disturbing is the way it connects to real scandals and real events. The European Union's quiet push for deeper integration in the 1990s, the sudden rise of unelected technocrats in Brussels, the seamless coordination of economic policy across borders. All of this was allegedly rehearsed in secret meetings where Maria was present. Was she simply an observer, or was she one of the guiding hands? One rumor that refuses to die claims that Maria played a role in smoothing the entry of certain Eastern European states into the EU, not through treaties and parliaments, but through private agreements reached at dinners, sealed with handshakes that never appeared in public records. Another whispers that she was a messenger between European royals and American financiers, carrying words too sensitive to be put in cables or phone calls. And then there are the journalists. Several reporters who later rose to prominence, even winning international recognition, were early guests at functions where Maria held sway. Did she open doors for them? Or were they brought close to ensure loyalty, to remind them that careers can be made and unmade by unseen patrons? The sudden silence of many of these same journalists on the subject of Bilderberg raises questions that remain unanswered. Maria was also rumored to be the one who maintained the social fabric of Bilderberg. Every network of power has a glue, the person who keeps rival factions from turning on each other, who smooths egos, who ensures continuity when governments change. For decades, she may have played that role, smiling over wine glasses, soothing conflicts before they reach the table, keeping the machinery of elite influence running silently in the background. And then, she was gone. In 2002, Maria died. And with her passing, the silence grew thicker. No exposés, no memoirs, no confessions. Just a handful of flat obituaries, stripped of detail. It was as if her life's work had been erased overnight. Compare this to the lavish coverage given to politicians with far less access. Why was Maria allowed to vanish quietly? Or more accurately, why was she made to vanish? The absence of information is itself information. It tells us that the networks she maintained remain active and that her memory is inconvenient. Powerful groups erase only what they fear will draw attention. And Maria, if remembered, might have revealed too much about how the world actually works. Think about the timing. The early 2000s were a period of transition. The euro was being solidified, new wars were being planned, globalization was entering a new phase. Those decisions were not made in parliaments alone. They were shaped in private gatherings off the record, where the official story was already decided before the public ever voted. Maria's passing during this period raises questions about whether she had finished her work, or whether her absence made way for someone else to take the role of invisible custodian. Some have suggested that Maria's death was simply convenient. An elderly woman whose influence was waning, taken by natural causes. But power does not retire. Influence does not simply fade. If she was indeed as central as some whisper, then her death leaves a hole that someone had to fill. Who replaced her? Who now carries the secrets she once guarded? These questions have no official answers, which is why we must ask them. Look at the broader pattern. Every few decades, history reveals the existence of a hidden hand. In the Renaissance, it was advisors and bankers who whispered to kings. In the 20th century, it was intelligence handlers who moved presidents like chess pieces. In Maria's case, it was a quiet Belgian woman with impeccable connections and an uncanny ability to remain invisible. She fits the archetype perfectly. And that is why she has been forgotten. Because memory is dangerous. If the public remembered Maria Snoeys-Lagler, they might start to ask, how many others like her exist? How many names are deliberately erased, scrubbed from records, shielded from scrutiny? And how many of the decisions we believe were made in parliament chambers were actually decided long before, in secret, at a table where Maria poured the wine? This is the nature of true power. It does not announce itself. It does not campaign. It hides in plain sight, wrapped in respectability, shielded by silence. Maria Snoeys-Lagler was one of those rare figures who left just enough of a trace for us to glimpse the truth, that our world is not shaped only by the leaders we elect, but by the people we never see, whose names we never know. So the question is not just who Maria was. The question is who stands in her place now. Who carries on her work, connecting the bankers, the royals, the spymasters, the media, the politicians, all behind closed doors? And perhaps the bigger question is this. If Maria Snoeys-Lagler could be erased so completely from the public record, who else has already been erased? How many hidden queens of power are out there, shaping the course of history, invisible by design? At HAlt Videos, we intend to find out.